When we find our spy, and we will find them, we shall turn them from an obstacle to an asset. Wouldn't you agree, Agent Kallus?
A little Taylor Swift humor for ya. Welcome back to Rebels Revisited. Such a wonderful episode we're covering today. Not only is it super important to the plot, but it's just a good episode, so let's get into it. This is an Inside Man Revisited. So much happens in this episode. Kanan, Ezra, and Mr. Sumar infiltrate an Imperial factory on Lothal with the help of Ryder Azadi. Azadi's cell has been infiltrating the factory and sabotaging vehicle construction. It gets pretty crazy. Sumar dies, Thrawn is terrifying, and we finally find out that Fulcrum is Agent Kallus. Now, let's break everything down. At the beginning of the episode, we see Kanan and Ezra back on Lothal for the first time since... I think since Shroud of Darkness. Has it really been that long? Yeah, I think that's right. So they haven't been on Lothal since last season. I've talked about season 3 being a transition before, and I think a large part of the purpose of this season is to transform the show from what it was in season 1 and 2 into what it becomes in season 4. And I think that for several reasons, so I'll probably bring this up again later. Season 3 has always been a little awkward for me to watch, actually, because of that. But not in a bad way. You know, not in any way that I don't think is necessary. It's just growing pains, you know? A lot has to happen in order to shape the show and characters into who they are in season 4. And this is one aspect of that they haven't been on Lothal in so long. The scope of the show is expanding, which means leaving behind the Lothal system where they spent all of season 1. The characters lost that original home base, and I think that idea really fits with the character arcs this season, at least symbolically. There's this idea of losing your center and trying to find your footing again. And since they've been away for Lothal for so long, it's a shock to come back and see the state of things. The Imperial occupation is worse than they thought.
Ryder said it was bad, but this is worse than bad. Lothal is my home, Kanan. I can't stand seeing it like this.
Every time Ezra sees the state of his home deteriorating, it breaks my heart. He's been grappling with this since season 1, and it just gets worse and worse all the time until season 4 when it's awful. And he has to watch it happen, stage by stage. And just to pour salt in my own wound, he doesn't get to see it restored. Not yet, anyway. He watches his home die before his eyes, and he sacrifices himself for it. And it's so unfair that he had to watch the process of his home dying, but he didn't get to watch the process of its restoration. But that's also what he sacrificed himself for, so... Lothal is beautiful and waiting for you when you come home, Ezra. So after that, we get to meet Ryder Azadi's rebel cell, and Ezra reunites with Mr. Sumar. It's a very sweet moment between them.
Mr. Sumar!
Is that Ezra Bridger? I hardly recognize you. You're so tall. Oh, and you cut your hair.
It's good to see you too.
Okay, 1, that's a mood. That's me turning on Steps into Shadow and being like, Ezra, you look so grown up, every single time without fail. 2, it ties Ezra back to this place. Sumar is a friend who Ezra had before the show started, and this is a good reminder that we're back on his home turf, and Ezra has personal connections to this place. But it also shows how Ezra is bigger than his home now, because in a bit he starts talking about Phoenix Squadron, and it's hard not to compare Ezra's current station in the rebellion with Azadi's cell, which is a lot like what the Ghost Crew used to be. So it's kind of jarring, actually, to be faced with the fact that Ezra can go back home, but he's irrevocably changed from the boy he was when he left. But at the same time, there are some things that will never change, like his kind heart and how much he cares about Lothal and its people. 3, it makes us care about Mr. Sumar. We see he's an old friend of Ezra's, we see that he wants to make a difference through the rebellion, and we see that he's just a pleasant guy, and that just makes his death even more brutal than it already was. That scene is stomach-churning enough as it is, but the fact that it happens to a guy like Sumar really just twists the knife, you know? Speaking of that, let's go to the Imperial factory, shall we? Man, Thrawn is terrifying.
Thank you for the introduction, Agent Kallus. My visit is not an honor, however, but an investigation.
Thrawn is terrifying?
This 624 AVA is the last bike you personally inspected and assembled. Please, demonstrate for me how quickly it can achieve full speed.
Thrawn is terrifying.
Something's wrong. It's overheating. Gonna have to shut it down.
No, the demonstration is not yet over.
I can't stop it!
Now that I have your attention, know this. Whatever you build here, you will test personally. I expect your malfunction rate to drop substantially.
Terrifying. I will never forget watching that for the first time. It was so unsettling and so unlike anything I'd ever seen on Rebels before, which is probably why it was so unsettling. The only expectations I ever have are subconscious. They're emotional, tonal expectations that I just naturally build up by watching something and getting used to how it works emotionally and tonally. And this scene, deliberately I think, breaks that. This is another aspect of Season 3 being a transition period. Thrawn is clearly a turning point in the series. Twilight of the Apprentice was the biggest turning point in the series because it unlocked a new level of tonal range. The series could get darker and more serious without it feeling out of character because of what Twilight of the Apprentice tonally unlocked, and I think that Thrawn is a major way that the writers acted on that new potential. He's unlike anything seen on Rebels before. He actually outsmarts the Rebels. He's brutal with ease, but he's not exactly larger than life. Which is a weird thing for me to say because he's so genius that he's almost overpowered and he certainly has a unique look about him. But I think it all comes down to Lars Mikkelsen's delivery. It's always so subdued and calculating. He doesn't have the theatrics of the Grand Inquisitor, Vader, or Maul, so there's something more grounded about him, and it makes the danger he poses feel very urgent and more real than ever before. And that's the great thing about this episode. It's constantly highlighting how Thrawn is onto the plot of the Rebels, and he's not afraid to take some names. Here's another scene.
Agent, victory and defeat are often determined by the smallest detail. For example, take this walker. Is this your work?
Yes, sir. I oversaw its construction.
Have the walker step forward.
Watch it!
He's so dangerous! Lars Mikkelsen is so good. I know I'm a broken record, but he's so good. There's this air of Thrawn being deliberately subdued that creates such a sense of danger. By the way he says things, you know that he's figured things out and he's going to act on it even when he doesn't say it and even though he's staying calm. And it's the way that he stays calm that makes him feel infinitely more dangerous. Having read the Thrawn books makes this so different to watch because now when I watch him work through this, I see it from his side and it feels weirdly normal. This is just another mystery, just like all the ones that I read about him solving. And he was the protagonist when I read about him solving those mysteries. I wasn't expecting my brain to apply that context here, but it definitely made for an interesting viewing experience because I'm just kind of watching this and I'm like, oh yeah, there's Thrawn just solving his mystery, and I'm used to rooting for him when he goes to solve his mysteries because I'm used to reading about him being the protagonist solving the mysteries. But now, he's the antagonist to the protagonists of this series. I can't root for him this time. So then we get a look into Thrawn's office where we see all of the art and information he's collected, which is really cool. Out of curiosity, I took a closer look and identified as much of his collection as I could. Obviously, there's Sabine's art, Hera's family portrait, and the Syndulla Calicori. He has art directly tied to the Ghost Crew in order to study them. He also has a Temple Guard mask. According to StarWars.com trivia, it's apparently the mask Kanan wore. no idea how he got that, but boy, is it interesting that he has it. There's a picture of Ezra from when he went undercover in Breaking Ranks in Season 1, so Thrawn is really digging up everything he can about the Ghost Crew. He has a Bardotan statue, no idea why, but hey, it's there. Maybe he's trying to learn about the Force and other cultures besides the Jedi, like since Lasat culture is Force-centric, maybe he was just trying to look at another Force-centric culture, see how it works. Or maybe he just has it. Maybe it's not relevant to the Ghost Crew. Maybe he just has it, like, just to have. He has some Lothal cave paintings, and I love how thorough this proves he is. He studies Lothal itself to understand the Ghost Crew. Even though most of them aren't from Lothal, he understands that they'll always return to it, and that it is their true home. I wonder what he's deducing from these images. They do depict some Lothwolves. What does he figure out? How much does he learn? I think the coolest pieces he's looking at are the Mandalorian art, and both of the pieces can be found in the Clone Wars. One of them is seen in the Clone Wars during the Maul and Savage versus Sidious fight. When I saw this one, it reminded me of Picasso's Guernica, and when I looked it up, I found out that it was actually inspired by the Guernica, so that's a fun fact. Mandalorian art consistently seems to look very Picasso, actually, and I think that's really cool to kind of give their culture, like, a concrete artistic trait. The other picture seems to depict a Mandalorian crusade against the Jedi, and I think in the Clone Wars that can be found in the government building on Concordia. Not only are these taken directly out of the Clone Wars and it ties the universe together, but it shows Thrawn doing a deep dive into Sabine's culture to figure her out. Taking all of his art into account, it really shows just how thorough he is when he's trying to figure out an adversary. Not only does he have art on Lothal, which can kind of encompass the whole Ghost Crew in their background, but he also has things on each individual member of the Ghost Crew, and he's doing a deep dive into the culture of each individual member of the Ghost Crew. He doesn't mess around. And then when we leave Thrawn's office, a huge reveal is dropped. Kallus is Fulcrum. That was an amazing reveal the first time around, but it's almost better to rewatch this episode knowing that's the case, because it gives a new level of tension to the scenes with Price and Thrawn before that point. And you get a new perspective on what's actually happening when Kallus asks to be more in the know about Thrawn's project. Earlier in the episode, he says he can interrogate the factory workers to find rebel spies, but he won't know if they're lying unless he knows about Thrawn's project. You don't think anything of it at first, but now we know that he's probably trying to uncover some secrets that he can leak to the rebellion. And in trying to cover up this newfound alliance, Kanan and Ezra give us one of the funniest moments on the series, in my opinion.
Now, I just have to make this look convincing.
Okay.
Ezra!
What? That is convincing.
Yeah, but I was gonna do it.
Well, if he's one of us now, you'll get your chance.
The range of this episode. We have this and this in the same episode. I think it's so funny how Kanan and Ezra are reluctant to ally with Kallus. They seem to trust him at least a little bit since he knows the Fulcrum code phrase, but they don't have to be completely happy about it. They'll still throw him through some glass just for fun. And Kallus has hurt their family personally, so they dislike him with good reason. The pain he caused Zeb is no small thing, and they didn't have the experience with him that Zeb did in Honorable Ones. I also get the idea that Zeb didn't tell them all the details of what happened, so they don't have a reason to think differently of Kallus. And I guess for Ezra, that's where the line is. I was thinking about the last episode and this episode, and I was thinking about how Ezra trusts Hondo even though he shouldn't, and how that's one of his traits, being a little too trusting on occasion. He did it with Maul, too. So this episode did give me a tiny puzzle to solve. Why doesn't Ezra give Kallus the benefit of the doubt once he reveals that he's Fulcrum? And I guess it's because Kallus hurt his crew personally. He's seen the evil that Kallus was willing to do. So I guess for Ezra, it's like an innocent until proven guilty thing. He didn't have any concrete or personal reasons not to trust Hondo or Maul when they met, but Kallus has definitely proven himself guilty prior to now. I think that enhances Kallus's arc though, because it makes it harder for him, you know? There's no smooth sailing in this journey to becoming one of the good guys. He's in danger every second while he stays in the Empire, and the good guys are slow to accept him. That means that this decision really has to be something he's sure about in his heart. He has to be doing this because he believes it's the right thing. That way he'll stick to it no matter how hard it is for him. So then Thrawn figures out that the rebels have his plans and that there's probably a mole within the Empire.
I have found an unexpected ally. Or perhaps an expected one.
Kanan, Ezra, and Chopper get out of the factory on a walker. Sumar's wife finds out he died. After a little fight, the rebels go back to their base and uncover Thrawn's plans for a new TIE interceptor. But with shields! They immediately understand how this would spell catastrophe for their fleet and probably the rebellion in general, and it would. I personally think the TIE defenders could have turned the tide of the war. Then Kanan reveals that Kallus is Fulcrum, and Zeb's reaction is priceless.
Kallus is Fulcrum? How does that even make sense?
Caravast. I must have recruited him. You know, accidentally.
His face when Sabine is like, how does that even make sense? This is so funny to me.
You mean when you were stuck on that ice moon with him?
Yeah, well, we didn't kill each other, so I guess we're friends now.
Love the delivery of Zeb's line there. Like, the way he quiets down and he's making a joke. It's like he's trying to downplay what that experience was for both him and Kallus. He's like, I will conceal the weight of this experience, but little do you know, it has become a core memory. And Hera doesn't trust Kallus any more than Kanan and Ezra do, saying that they need to be cautious until they know what game he's playing. And that's just great because he's not playing a game. Kallus has to fight for this redemption, huh? Then, lastly, back to Thrawn's office for some delicious danger.
You know, after analyzing the rebels' escape, it's clear to me they had help from one within our Imperial ranks.
The rebels have a mole, and all personnel must be interrogated. This spy must be found.
Patience, Governor. Acting out of emotion will not serve us here. We must wait and watch. And when we find our spy, and we will find them, we shall turn them from an obstacle to an asset. Wouldn't you agree, Agent Kallus?
Your strategy is without flaw, Grand Admiral. As always.
Thrawn already knows it's Kallus. He already knows. Like, I really think that he already has a hunch that it's Kallus, which is the same thing as him knowing. You can just tell, like, the way he says, wouldn't you agree, Agent Kallus? I mean, come on, there's no way that he doesn't suspect Kallus. But the way Thrawn works is that he doesn't come forward with his suspicions until he's sure he can prove them, because that's what he has to do. There's this quote in the book Alliances where Vader is thinking about Thrawn, and he realizes that Thrawn had been distrusted and his opinions casually dismissed, and that he had known how it felt to be powerful, yet still an outsider. And because of that, and Thrawn has a quote about this in Alliances, Thrawn has to know all the details in order to be trusted or taken seriously. Because, you know, alien racism in the Empire. Well, what a fantastic episode. This episode is great because it feels like the show is getting back on track in a way, to me. I've said this before, but I struggle a bit with season 3, especially this part that I just got past that's like in the middle of the first half of the season. Now, you just saw me review all of those episodes, and if it's not clear that I love them, then I don't know what to tell you. But I do still struggle with that bit, and I guess it's because some of them aren't as character-driven as I'm used to, and some of them are using the characters in ways that I'm not used to, like, emotionally, because that's just what has to happen at this point in the series. But this episode, it feels like going home. It's back on Lothal, Kanan and Ezra are teamed up, and Kallus's arc kicks into gear, which is what really does it for me. Kallus is going through an arc that adheres to classic Star Wars themes about choosing to do the right thing, and that sort of gives me a center to grasp onto in the midst of Season 3's chaos. Speaking of chaos, the King of Chaos himself returns in the next episode, the fantastic Visions and Voices. Can't wait to see you there. Until then, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you always.